Hello and welcome back to another episode of the RotoWire Fantasy Soccer Podcast. I am Andrew Laird, Senior Soccer Editor, joined by a very special guest today on a very different topic from what the regular RotoWire Fantasy Soccer Podcast covers. Joining me today is Andy Black, who some of you may know if you're on Sorare as Black. Very really went out on a limb there on that name.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
But Andy, thank you for coming on to chat some Sorare.
Yeah, appreciate it. I'm excited to join you here.
It's Sorare has been very different than anything that we usually cover at RotoWire, and there have been a number of people who are subscribers that are getting into it just as like a new way to play fantasy soccer. I'll be honest, NFTs were very new to me when I joined. They're still new to me, but how did your NFT journey start?
Yeah, so it actually started back in like late 2017.
Oh, wow.
I started mining ETH, so I kind of got into the game that way. It was like a slow trickle effect, and I found a couple of projects that were interesting to me. The first one I noticed was CryptoKitties, which I never touched it, never bought it, never did anything with it, but I watched it and it was interesting to me. The rarity behind it, the digital scarcity is the word that everybody's throwing around, and it was definitely interesting to watch. But I never got involved with the project. Wish I did, looking back, but never did. The next one to come along was MLBC, which ended up being a disaster of a project, but there was a glimmer of hope there. I mean, it was NFTs involving a Major League Baseball license, and it was it was really itching towards going the route of Sorare, but it was a terrible team that didn't really care about the project. They didn't care about baseball. They didn't understand the game, which was really disappointing because it was very reflective in their project. So when you looked at the scoring, because they had a fantasy aspect to theirs, I think they termed it as fantasy-esque. And when you looked at some of the things that they had in the gameplay, it was ridiculous. Like there were game events for two pickoffs in the same inning, I think, and it was like, I've never seen that happen.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's happened once in the history of baseball. And then they were awarding things for things that they thought were less common, like they had a legendary event for Grand Slams, and that was actually a pretty common event. So people were getting rewarded based on that. So, at any rate, I don't want to talk about that too long because it was kind of a sad moment for a lot of us guys that actually came over to Sorare from that project. Kind of moved on from that. I dabbled in Gods Unchained. I don't know if you've seen that one, but that's a NFT project that's really kind of a playoff of Hearthstone. I don't know if you've ever played Blizzard's Hearthstone or similar to Magic the Gathering, something like that. The NFTs are actually the cards in the game, and there's scarcity built behind them, and it's actually a really cool project. It's still going on. I still own cards and packs and stuff, but I never got as obsessed with it as say Sorare. I was always interested in it. It looked fun, but I just never really got that I guess obsession. Yeah. So I still hold a bunch of cards and whatnot, but don't really do anything with them. They have some awesome technology that they're building into their product right now. Scaling technology. It's called Immutable X. It's using ZK rollups, I believe, and something called Optimism. So that's going to allow for faster transactions, quicker transactions, cheaper transactions. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw our friends over at Sorare start talking to Gods Unchained and Immutable X, and we start to see some of that technology get built into their platform, and we start to see faster transactions and cheaper transactions for Sorare, which, I mean, if they're able to do transactions for, pennies on the dollar, their margins just explode. Yeah. Like right now, their margins are probably great on new signings, but they would be ridiculously good on, new signings if they were able to implement a technology like that. So really cool stuff. After Gods Unchained, found Sorare, and it's been kind of just an obsession ever since. I started dabbling in the Belgian leagues and buying a few random players, not really knowing what I was doing, and probably made some awful purchases. But
Sounds familiar.
that was my way of easing in, right? And then slowly found some players that started scoring consistently for me, and then I think the big moment for a lot of us guys was when they added the MLSPA. When they added MLSPA, that's kind of the moment we were like, okay, this is going to be big. This is real. And it was more of a hit home to us because these are teams that we watch, players that we watch on a regular basis. And we had the opportunity to invest in them, buy them, use them in fantasy lineups. So that was kind of the big moment for us.
Did you have a moment at some point where you just were like, NFTs are it? Or was it like as soon as you heard about NFTs, you were like, oh, I'm in? Like, yeah, I think there's a kind of a leap of faith with NFTs that
definitely a leap of faith. Like when I first heard about them, it made sense, but it was like, is it just a fad?
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of it might be like the art and the non-utility based stuff. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that's a fad. Maybe that's my ignorance and I just don't fully understand it. Because there is something special about that digital signature where, a piece of artwork is digitally signed by that artist and you own that token.
Right.
That's interesting. I don't fully understand the CryptoPunks and the stuff that's millions of dollars. That just baffles my mind. But it certainly makes sense to a lot of people out there, and they're playing that game. And by all means, right? I mean, but for me, it was never like something where I had it clicked and it just made sense right away. It was like a slow trickle. Like I had to start using them, start playing around with it, and slowly but surely, I guess it just started to make sense to me.
I think not that I still like doubt it, but it took me a while, and I had before Sorare had no NFT background, and so it was kind of this idea of why do these things have value, and then I think when I realized not only how many people thought they had value, but what those values were, like just like totaling up the amount of money that was involved, and I was like, not that these things can't go to zero, but I felt more comfortable with it. And I mean, I come more from the DFS side, and I think there was just this idea of if you could actually separate the cards from the game if you wanted. Like if you're just like, it doesn't make sense to me that I buy these like digital cards, but like if you just forget that and we're like, you're actually just buying somebody to play in a game, like that got it to me. Like I think what threw me off at first about Sorare is that it was kind of presented to me as a digital collectible that you happen to use in a game. And I think it's actually switched, that it's like, let's play this game that you just happen to use these digital collectible things with.
I'll disagree with you a little bit there. I think it depends on who you talk to.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I was saying the idea of going in on the game at least convinced me that it was like, okay, I can do this.
Right. Same for me. But you look at somebody like Gary Vee who bought the Mbappe and João Felix's. It's like he has no interest in playing the game.
Yeah.
He bought those, put them in his wallet, and they're just sitting there, which, I mean, that's great for us that are playing the game because it takes out one of the 100 Mbappes from gameplay. And in fact, I think HG was showing in one of his from Sorare data one week that only 50% of the Mbappes were in play one week, which is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Best player in the game, best utility in the game. You can put him in Champion Europe, U23 All-Star. You can put him in any of these lineups, and 50% of the people chose not to use him. It's wild.
Well, I think what goes beyond that is there are a number of people who own multiple Mbappes. And so it's like they go out and buy 5, and now all 5 of those are gone. And it makes it a little easier for people who are trying to compete with it.
I mean, even if you had 5, you could find a way to use them all. I mean,
Sure, absolutely.
There's plenty of divisions, but I haven't even looked at the data on who owns them all and why they're choosing not to use them. But my guess is they're just collectors that see one of 100. And I mean, I'm not one of the big sports collectible guys, so I don't really know what is rare in that world.
Mm-hmm.
But one of 100 seems pretty rare.
Yeah. That's how I felt. Like the more that I play Sorare, the more I realize like just how scarce these cards are. Because you're right. Like one of 100, when we see Topshot does thousands of each series. And the thing that always got me about Topshot, not to bring Topshot in because I don't own any Topshot, but it's like
I do, so we can talk about it.
Okay, so so if you buy, let's say, one of, I don't know what their denominations are, but even if it's one of 1,000, you're buying one of 1,000 of a moment, not necessarily one of 1,000 of a player. And a player could have plenty of moments. And with the Sorare cards, like you're getting 100 rare cards a year, and some guys won't get them depending on if they transfer or whatever. I think what's kind of what I was realizing the other day with Mbappe is he could have more Sorare cards by the end than anybody else. Like as long as he stays in, like there could be a ton of, like every year those cards actually get less scarce, even though we talk about how scarce they are anyway. I say that to help myself because I'm nowhere remotely close to owning an Mbappe card of any scarcity. So I'm going
to go with that too. Yeah, because I don't know one either. So that's what I'm going to start saying.
So what got me, what was really interesting to me when I joined was how the value, the card prices seem to be so heavily skewed towards utility in the game. And when I thought of like, well, if we're collecting these, why am I buying these random guys from these random leagues that people will never hear of? And I'm like, they score well, that's fine. And then it's like, well, if you have those guys, then you can win the guys you know. And it's like, oh, okay. And so like it all just started to make sense. And I think what we saw recently, and the reason, like the minute I was like, I need to have this guy on our podcast to talk about this, is when we saw Gary V come in, and then all of these collectors and all of these prices are going up. And you said you had never seen something like this in Sorare. And it's not like Sorare has been around for 20 years, but there did seem to be like this fundamental shift in people valuing the collectible side more than the utility. And I think that's actually turned a little bit. But it was, but like the prices we were seeing, it's like, we kind of joke around, João Felix is nowhere remotely close to good enough right now to justify the prices that he, like he is a collectible card. The utility 100%. Is just brutal. But yeah, like the fact that this game had been around for like 2 years, and then all of a sudden the collectible and the utility just went like this, was really fascinating to me. And I was wondering kind of what you guys felt, you guys meaning the ones who have been around for 2 years, like how you guys were responding to this.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of angles to look at there. So like going back to the João Felix kind of comment earlier, I mean, yeah, it's his utility now, but it's also his future utility that people are looking at. So there's collectible aspect there, but there's also future utility. And, you know, the collectors kind of think sometimes too about, you know, flipping these cards. And if they can push that market up and start buying all the João Felixes, you know, they become more scarce and they can start selling them for higher prices.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of market mechanics in play there where people are probably playing that game a lot in Topshot and trying to bring that here, which, you know, I think that we saw a little wave. I think that it's going to kind of be that way where we're going to see waves of collectors come in, then it's going to cool off, and then another wave, and then who knows? At some point, it might just get absolutely crazy. But kind of going back to what you were talking about previously, what was the question?
Just like how. I mean, you talk to a lot of people who have been around for a while. So like, was the response when these card prices started skyrocketing, mostly from the people
Right.
who are collecting.
Yeah, so
Is
I think our perspective was this is great for us that own a lot of cards, but it's not all that great for somebody coming in wanting to play the fantasy game, because that's going to push all prices up. And I think that that's where a lot of the talk began of this new uncommon or common type of scarcity, where it does help the game be accessible to those types of players.
Yep.
But obviously, we don't want to devalue what's already there. So I think that the team has a very difficult challenge ahead of them in that route. But I trust them to make the right choices as well.
Was there ever a thought that the game was going to be completely different because of the collectors coming in? Like, did you think there was a possibility that it was just never going to be the same?
I still think that could happen, right? I mean, if all of the big collectors just decided to come in and buy the named players,
Mm-hmm.
the Ronaldos, the Neymars, the Mbappes. I mean, they're basically deleting them from the game and driving all the prices up.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, with scarcity the way it is, 1 of 100, 1 of 10, 1 of 1, I feel like if somebody with a lot of money just wanted to come in and kind of dictate prices, they could.
Yeah, thankfully we haven't really seen that yet.
Yeah.
I feel like this recent spike, and we were kind of, just like you were saying, like half of the Mbappes aren't being used. So prices are skyrocketing, and it felt a little bit like what I'm watching people talk about Sorare look like what I see people talk about, or how people talk about Topshot. We're like, everything's going up. We're all buy now because you can sell so much more later. And we saw that clearly peak, like where prices have absolutely come down since then. They're still much higher than they were pre-Gary V.
Right.
So it's still fairly expensive to get into the game.
Absolutely.
But I think what we saw is kind of weird. Like, a bunch of people came in to get these collectible cards and then just left. And like they got the cards they want.
I don't know that I'd 100% say that.
Not all of them. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Like I think if you looked at if you considered the three different kinds of people who play, are the ones who like really focus on the games, the ones who are in it just to trade cards, and then the third is just the collectible guys. I think
and then there's
all
people
of
trying to do all of it.
Yeah, well, yeah. But I think the ones who are just collecting, not that they're gone, but the ones who are going after the big cards, those guys are gone. Because like once you get the ones that you want, like there's no reason to stay until
Here's
maybe
why I
the new ones
disagree
come
with
out.
that, though. I had a guy contacted me on Discord yesterday, and he's like, "Hey, I'm interested in buying Kamish," which, okay, cool, let's do a deal. And I looked at his gallery, and he had, I think, 4 Ronaldos, and that was it. And he's like, he was telling me that he's trying to come up with a Champions D3 team, and now I look back at his. We ended up not making a deal, by the way, but I ended up looking back at his account today, and he had a Gianluca Mancini defender, and then he had, I think, a Lewandowski, or he bought Cruz. So he's making a team.
Yes.
He's getting there. I think that just that his first introduction was, okay, got to buy Ronaldo.
Right.
So he bought 4 of them.
4 of them.
And then now he's slowly figured the game out, and it sounds like he is ready to make a team and play. So I think that we might see some of that. Maybe not.
No. Now that you described that, there are multiple people who I've kind of spoken to who did that. Who came in and were like, "Oh, I'll get an Mbappe." One of which came in a day or two before Gary V, maybe let's call it 4 days before, and just went nuts. Like the phrase I jokingly, like, he came in hot and just bought all these cards, and then Gary V came in and all of his cards were like just exploded.
Good for him.
And he bought them knowing he would need them in the game, but there was just no rhyme or reason. He's like, this guy's good, this guy's good, this guy's good. And then he started to like build teams, and he's like, oh, I'm not really building teams here.
Right.
And the light bulb went off, and now he's winning plenty. Is there a negative at all to people being able to pretty much like just buy their way in if they have enough money?
I mean, I don't think so. I think that's kind of the point behind the game a little bit. I mean, I think that expectations are important, right?
Yeah.
If I come in with, a small budget, my expectations should not be I'm going to go win Division I, Champions Europe. I need to expect this, and if I'm not, I'm going to go whine on Discord. Like that is not a good expectation. But if I come in with a small budget, I could grind out the All-Star D4 with a common goalie, eventually get to the point where I can afford a goalie, and then, hey, at that point, I'm making a run at All-Star D4 card prizes. And after you get to that point, you start winning those card prizes, you might get to starting to build a U23 team or a challenger or champion team, whatever. You start to build out, and at some point you'll be able to build up into the D3s. So I think that there's kind of a couple of ways to approach that, right? Building out and building up. So if you have a lot of money, you might come in and say, okay, I'm going to play D4, D3, D2, and kind of attack all of the divisions that way. But I think if you're on a budget, you're going to slowly expand across the D4s. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. And I think that that's a great way to play the game.
I was talking to somebody recently, just like, even if you wanted to come in quickly and buy in as high as you can to play everything, it still takes a while. Like you can't just identify 5 guys in each division. And you're like, I'm going to play. That's all I need. And and I'm in. Like there's a lot of work that goes into competing everywhere or as much as you can. And I think people kind of misunderstand that. It's a lot of the people who come in with lower budget, not that I think they expect to like win right away, but I think there is a little hole. There's a little, and we've talked about, and lots of people talked about how the payout structure probably needs to be expanded a little bit. But it's like, oh, buy your cards and compete for cards and cash, and like it sounds easy. It's one of the, just like DFS. I explained this. It's very easy to play and very hard to win consistently. But it is funny to me because I've seen people say like, well, if you spend $200 on one player, which 4 weeks ago was you could get a pretty good player, and now it's not as good. But they were like, over 10 years, like that's nothing per year. And I'm like, nobody's thinking this way. Like I appreciate that we own these things forever, and hopefully Sorare is still around in 10 years and we're still playing. But like it's just a funny concept that you can start to play quickly.
Sometimes, though.
What's that?
Like where I'm betting on the platform, kind of when I buy a young player, it's like as long as I'm betting that Sorare is going to exist in 5 years or 3 years or whatever. That's kind of what you're doing. You're betting that the platform is going to be successful, and you're betting that player is going to be successful. So it's kind of a combination of factors, right? Yeah, for sure.
I guess I just never really think that long term when it comes to like fantasy sports like that. There's Sorare is obviously much more than just collectibles and fantasy sports, but like you have to separate yourself a little bit from the I need guys who score really well right now. And
have you ever played in a dynasty league, like a fantasy football dynasty league?
It's yes, and I don't now, but I used to, and I'll be honest, I hated it. Like by the end, I hated it, and yet here I am buying these cards forever.
That's kind of what this is at.
It's absolutely
scale, right?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what it is, and
except you don't have that guy that drops out of your league, and then you have to try to find a replacement for when their team's terrible.
Well, I look at that as the people who have all these cards that I want who haven't been on the site for 6 months because they've given up,
right?
Not realizing they're sitting on a gold mine right now.
That's right.
But yeah, there's just like that aspect of I own these guys forever, and I think The hardest part of Sorare is the necessary patience, and it's the patience of if you are buying players who don't necessarily play now, and that's why I did that previous video, and I'll probably do a follow up of you. Before you start spending money, you really have to figure out what you want in the short term and the long term, because you can buy plenty of players right now who hopefully will play in 5 years and you have them cheap, but like you're not getting anything out of them right now at all. And so what you need to figure out what that is. When you started, you said you just bought a bunch of Jupiler guys.
Randoms, man.
Well, I think that the other funny thing about the Jupiler League is that was like the first league on Sorare. And so when I talk to people and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna like grind the Jupiler League," and I'm like, just so you know, everyone has done that because it's been around the longest.
I honestly feel like that division needs a little bit of a workover. The whole Challenger is very diluted. I mean, you have 3 years of Jupiler cards in there now. You have the Portuguese cards. You have all of I can't pronounce it. Eredivisie.
Close
Sound
enough.
right? Ish.
Close enough. Yeah.
So you have all those cards now. So you have a massive player pool, and there's so many stars in there. Like I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were thinking about buying a Vanaken card, and I was like, I don't know. I mean, you really have to hit the lotto, to really to win that division. You have to, you have to put up 400 in D4 or a very high score, which. And this past week, I mean, we were talking about almost 500.
Yeah, this past week was ridiculous.
There were just crazy good scores that week, and I feel like if you're wanting to be competitive somewhere, that's probably not the best place to go and try your luck. Just there's old guys like me that have been on the platform for 2 years, and we've been collecting all these Belgian players, and we have, I mean, honestly, that's like probably one of the last divisions that I fill out my lineups for. And I have really good players that go into those lineups. And it's like, I know people are buying high priced players for those divisions and then trying to compete there. And it's like, well, some of us guys have, those are our leftover cards that we're throwing in there, which is kind of weird to think about.
I think what got me was how small Champion Europe was. And it was like, well, those guys are going to be expensive because they're, they're the popular teams that everybody knows. But it's like, well, it's also, not to consistently use this word, but they're a lot more scarce because they're just like a lot fewer teams than Challenger. And I think when you get into Sorare, you're like, oh, I'll just look at these smaller leagues. And you're like, no. Like, if you're looking at smaller leagues, don't look at the European ones because everybody's been looking at those.
I mean, the other reason they're expensive is because you can win the best players with those players, right? So, I mean, that definitely drives the prices up on them. U23 is an interesting, and All-Star are interesting as well because you can take those Belgian players and you can win the players from the Champions Europe League. So I think that a lot of times, too, if I'm going to compete with those good Challenger players, I think a lot of times All-Star and U23 are the place to go because you might get lucky and win a Champion Europe player there.
And then have to sell it for somebody else.
Right.
So you've seen some season turnovers, obviously.
Yes.
We're coming over, March 11th. We still have 2 more months basically of the European leagues, but MLS is about a month away. J League and K League just started. For those who are just getting involved, is there a benefit to do prices tend to go down as seasons?
Not a ton. I mean, I'm not going to say that it's going to crash at the end of the year. It's nothing like that. But it's the prices will slowly deteriorate as the season ends, and in the off season, that will sustain. There'll be lulls in the prices because there's not going to be any buying pressure.
Right.
So the only people that are selling are going to have to sell at kind of the lowest possible prices because people aren't really looking to buy those cards in the off season because they can't use them right now.
Right.
So and I think that if you're worried about your investment losing money on your investment, just hold all the way through it and you'll be fine once the next season starts. But if you're one of those guys that likes to kind of play the market, you might, 1 to 2 weeks out before the end of the season starts, you might start selling some of those cards, make a little bit of profit or whatever, and then as the off season comes up, you might rebuy them or whatever when they're lower. But I mean, some people like to kind of play that game. That's not something I'm really all that into. I've done it a little bit with a few cards, but that's just the amount of effort it takes to like really game the market like that. You see people doing it. They're doing it. There's big card holders that are constantly out there working their butts off, but it's just not for me.
I joined in November.
Okay.
And I think I bought my first card in December, or it was the end of November, and I started buying some MLS cards in December. And I was like, oh, these guys are kind of cheap. They look dirt cheap now that we've had this spike. But it was like the mistake I made was, oh, I want to compete right now. And I bought these MLS cards, and I'm like, well, they're not playing. So I have these cheap MLS cards, but I can't use them. So now I'm like, oh, European Challenger. Those guys will be overlooked because nobody wants to play those guys. And it's like, oh, nope. These pros have all these guys. But I think just like what I went back to before, like you have to figure out like if you want to compete now, because if you want to compete now, then like buying a bunch of these European cards, you'll get a few weeks out of them, but you're going to run out of time. And in the summer, supposedly we'll have some competitions where we can use them, but unless you have some really good guys who are on national teams, maybe you get a little stuck. But it's like a fine line between being able to buy cheap going into a season or in the off season and figuring out just how to compete still. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so this is going to be a special year with Euros. Like we kind of chatted about this on Discord the other day, where there's limited numbers of players at certain positions in the Euros. So we're going to see at some point this summer, certain players' prices are just, not financial advice, right? But I think certain players' prices are just going to get ridiculous.
Yep.
Because people are going to want to play in whatever Euro competition Sorare puts out there, which, I think it's probably going to be Division 1 through 4 Euros, and then you just plug in your lineups. But we don't know. We don't know what they're going to announce. We don't know if they're even going to do it, although they've hinted heavily that they are.
Yeah.
So, I think that there's going to be this will be a very interesting offseason for those types of players.
I think I haven't ruled out the possibility of third parties running Euros competitions using Sorare cards either. I mean,
that's definitely on the table, I would think.
Yeah, for sure. How much do you think you will find yourself playing on like third party sites with these cards? Like they always talk about like you can use them anywhere, and we've had some.
I mean, I think what a couple of the guys that I've talked to that are DFS guys like yourself, what they're missing right now is if there was some kind of DFS element to this, where you submitted a lineup and it was $3, or you pay $100 and it was a head-to-head, or the 50-50s. I know you guys are big on too. Yep. So like, there's a lot of cool ideas there, but I think that there's a lot of anti-gambling laws or regulations or whatever that Sorare just doesn't want to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing says that somebody else couldn't, deal with the gambling authorities in their country and build a platform that you could use these cards on and play DFS with. With that said, I mean, that's pipe dream, right? Right now we have, I think, 3 or 4 other sites that have competitions, and I play along on all of them just because why not? It's interesting to see what other people are building. Some of it's really fun, like the Sorare Data Cup, where it's actually head-to-head every week.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's something awesome to me about head-to-head. I've played fantasy football all my life, so that weekly, pitted against another guy, there's something cool about that. So I really enjoy the cups that he does. And then I think that there's some other people doing like a 7-a-side. HG also has the 11-a-side, which is fun. But I think it's good for us to play as many of those as we can, just to kind of find what, where is this going to go? What's best? what is best for the platform. Is 5-a-side the best? Is 7? I don't know. I really like to kind of have my ears on the ground and kind of seeing what everybody's trying and everybody's doing.
Yeah, I think the different gameplay is nice. Like SO5, obviously, you only need 5 cards, and if you have a
Yeah,
lot more, then where do you use them? I mean, obviously, you have the different divisions, but if you just have dozens of rare cards, then ultimately you're not going to compete much. So like being able to use 7 somewhere else or 11 in another, like there's some cool ideas out there, and it's nice that the that you can buy a card once and use it in multiple places. Like there's
yeah.
just that doesn't seem to exist
It's
really
crazy
in
to think
like
about, right?
yeah. It's not like you can draft a fantasy football team somewhere and be like, oh, I'm going to play this team somewhere else too. Like that,
Yeah.
it's the utility is fun there. Um, do you think the this huge increase in prices that we saw and now kind of coming back down a little bit, do you think we're kind of just in a new normal of that's how we're going to go?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Not financial advice, right?
Right, right.
Yeah, I think it probably is kind of the new normal, and I think that I mean, just kind of what I've seen on the platform, it just kind of like I would describe it as waves. At the very beginning, cards, most cards were pretty cheap, but once it kind of goes up a tier in pricing, it seems to really stick there. And
Hmm.
I think my perspective on that is it's a testament to the team and how they've really committed to the scarcity, but also they're committed to like a organic growth. They're not out here marketing this like crazy yet, which theoretically, if they wanted to, they could go crazy and put this in front of everybody, and we would have the market mechanics of that would be really interesting. It'd be fun to
Yeah.
watch and it'd be fun to own a lot of cards when that happens, but would it be best for the game? Probably not. I mean, people would come in. There'd be a lot of people that got wrecked buying a card, at the top or whatever,
Yep.
and so yeah, I think that the way they're slowly building it kind of helps with that shelving of prices, where it kind of moves up to the next tier and moves up to the next tier. I think we'll continue to kind of see that type of growth. Again, not financial advice.
Right. Of course. Of course. I'm kind of curious if like what causes the next collector boom. Not so much what causes it, but like it seems like if we have another like big group of people come in who want to buy the big cards, because it's not like we saw all of the prices go up because everybody was buying all of the cards to collect. It was just kind of a natural, well, this was the difference between these guys, so it'll just keep going. But they're so scarce that they're almost the new collectors will, I think, be buying from the huge collector boom that we just saw. And like everybody who plays the game really shouldn't be affected, but we will be because those prices will go up ultimately and whatnot. But do you think, like my thought is we'll see another boom just the next season comes out, because there's going to be potentially 111 new Mbappes next year starting in September-ish or so.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah, I
I,
don't know that that'll like really have a huge effect on prices. But I think honestly, it really comes down to the number of people that come on the platform all in a given period of time. I mean, the
yeah.
shorter period of time, the more we're going to see, deviations in price. But if that's stretched out over a longer period of time, we'll see more of like an organic type growth that probably is more healthy for everyone. Where, we're not seeing people come in at the top of the spike and then 2 days later the thing is worth six F less or whatever. So I think the commitment to kind of that slow build is really important to the platform.
For sure. I noticed you pronounce it eth instead of eth.
F,
Is
E,
that is
yeah.
that an
I mean,
American thing? I don't even know. I've heard enough
I
people
don't
say
know.
it.
I think it's just a bad habit.
Oh. um, do you look at all prices in eth?
It's a great question. I do ish. I have an understanding that other people don't. So I tend to look at them just as the price in ETH, whatever. But I also know kind of how the market works. And the market is in a kind of strange gray area between the two,
Yeah, it
where
is.
it's not pinned to dollar, it's not pinned to euro, it's not pinned to ETH. It's some interesting space in between. And I think that that's fine too. I don't think that it needs to be pinned to anything.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. It's funny, just like there are a few people I know who have gotten into just kind of trading cards, and it's funny because I've started to look mostly just at ETH, and I think part of it is that I've sold some cards, so I'm basically buying them with ETH in my account.
Yeah.
But it's funny to see people perfectly content to take an ETH loss because ETH went up, and they're actually making their dollar profit is up, and I'll happily take the ETH, give them the ETH loss if they want. But that was one of the things that got me early on was it just felt like people who had been on the site for a while, and it made total sense, but like people who had been on the site for a while pretty much only thought in ETH. And I came in only thinking in dollars because I didn't own any ETH anyway. So,
right. Yeah. What the hell is an ETH, right?
Right. All I know is on the site, it started in euros, and I was like, let me put this in dollars.
Right.
And it was like, oh, this seems like whatever it was, this seems like a lot of money. And it's like, oh, well, it actually traded for half that in ETH, 2 months ago because Ethereum was so much lower.
Right.
So it's kind of this, it's just, it adds another thing that Sorare offers.
I think too, the goals of end users is a lot different as well. Some people are trying to make a profit in dollars. So that's what they're more concerned about. Some people are trying to accumulate the most ETH that they possibly can, and that's their strategy. So that's like another one of the billions of layers to this onion is, the goal of the end user. What are they trying to do? Do they not care about any of it, and they're just trying to get as many cards as they can, and their goal is to collect NFTs? That might be it too. Pick your poison, I guess.
Right. One of my favorite things recently was somebody was like, "Oh, a buddy of mine asked me how much money I've made on Sorare." And I was like, "Well, I have never sold a card."
Yeah.
So, but it's like it kind of feels a little Topshot-y of like, well, my account is worth $3 million. Oh, how many did you sell? None. Like, oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Not to get into that, but some of that stuff kind of scares me a little bit. Not in Sorare, but in Topshot. I've dabbled over there. I'm not a big user or anything, but just that my account is worth this. Like, okay, but you got to find somebody to buy it for that, right? So. I hope people are careful over there. I know that people probably are not being careful over there, but I hope everybody just kind of takes a step back. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on right now, like CryptoPunks selling for, I don't even know what I saw today, $7 million or something,
or something like that. Yeah,
70 million. I don't know. It was. I just remember seeing the number and I was like, that is absurd. That is absolutely absurd. But maybe that's the new normal. I don't know, but I hope that people are careful.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think one of the things that not like pushed me away from Topshot and towards Sorare was the utility that like I wasn't into. Not that I wasn't into collecting, but I just wasn't looking to do that.
Yeah.
And yet here I am accumulating as many Sorare cards as I can to compete in this game to win more cards.
Yeah, right.
But it came after my 10-year-old son got into collecting soccer cards just before COVID hit, and boxes we used to buy for $40 are now $400, and it's like, how do you explain like, oh, nothing's actually changed, but this is now 10
Dad
times
can't
more.
buy any more boxes.
Yeah, no more boxes.
But I can buy the digital versions.
Right.
They actually cost a lot more money.
A lot more, right? But you can't touch them.
Right.
Right. I think I've taken up enough of your time tonight. We kind of joked around that we could talk about Sorare forever.
Yeah, I think so.
I would love to have you back as well. Maybe we'll get a little more specific on some things. But I thought it would be great for the people who usually listen to this podcast of just hear the thoughts of somebody who's been on the site for a while, and anybody who's looking to get into Sorare. I think hopefully we set some expectations at least, or at least showed you where you should be setting your expectations.
Right. That's what we always talk about is the expectations. That's the most important thing, is setting the right level of expectations when you come in.
Yeah. I mean, we see in DFS all the time that if you're somebody who sees a lot of people winning and it just feels like, oh, everybody can win, and doesn't always happen.
I spent $3. Why didn't I win 10 grand?
Exactly. All of it. Exactly. But Andy, thank you very much for coming on, and good luck with all your Sorare cards there.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me, and same to you.
Thanks, man.